It was one of those cold, rainy evenings when the city seems to freeze in anticipation of something inevitable. I, Henry Carter, a young millionaire, was walking the streets of New York, trying to rid myself of the overwhelming feeling of emptiness that had washed over me. I had everything: money, success, power. What more could one want? And yet, amidst all this luxury, I felt an indescribable void. As I wandered the streets, I searched for an answer to what was wrong in my life. Lost in my thoughts, I suddenly noticed something unusual. At the far end of the street, near an abandoned building, sat a woman wrapped in a thin, already soaked blanket. She was trying to shield her little daughter from the cold wind and pouring rain. The sight made me stop. I saw how her face, gaunt and worn, radiated an unutterable sadness, yet she continued to exude an inner strength, trying to smile at her daughter. This scene struck me. Up until this moment, I had always walked past such sights, hardly paying attention, completely focused on my own affairs. But now, something was different. Maybe it was her gaze, the gaze of a woman who was ready to do anything for her child. Or perhaps I had finally realized that my life, full of comfort and luxury, lacked the one thing that mattered most. I felt a strange, inexplicable urge to approach them and help. Taking a deep breath, I crossed the street, drawing closer step by step to the woman and her daughter. As I got nearer, I saw how she looked at me cautiously, gripping her daughter's hand as if trying to protect her from a potential threat. I felt my heart slow down. "Good evening," I said, trying to speak as gently as possible so as not to frighten her. "My name is Henry. It seems to me that you need help. Please, let me help you and your daughter." She remained silent, studying me closely as if trying to read my intentions. In her eyes, I saw fear and distrust. Something in her gaze told me she had experienced too much pain and disappointment to easily trust a stranger. "I can buy you a hot meal and find a safe place for you to stay," I continued. I knew that words meant nothing. I had to show that I was truly sincere in my desire to help. After several long seconds of silence, she, still keeping her hand on her daughter's shoulder, nodded. "Thank you," she said quietly, her voice filled with exhaustion, but also a hint of hope. We headed to the nearest cafe, where I ordered hot food for them. I sat across the table, watching as she lovingly fed her daughter, making sure that Emma, as she introduced her, had enough to eat. I was struck by her selflessness and the maternal love that radiated from her. At that moment, I began to realize that I had never experienced anything like this in my life, such pure and selfless care for another person. When they finished eating, I finally mustered the courage to ask the question that had been lingering on my mind. "How did you end up in this situation?" I asked cautiously, trying not to sound too blunt. Lauren, that was her name, glanced at her daughter briefly before beginning her story. Her story was a bitter one. She explained that they once had a peaceful life. She worked as a teacher, raising Emma on her own. They had a small, cozy house, and everything was going smoothly. She saved money, striving to secure a better future for her daughter. However, everything changed when a man appeared in their lives, offering Lauren a chance to double her savings. He presented himself as a friend and promised her the world. In hopes of a better future for Emma, Lauren trusted him and invested all her savings. Then, losing herself in dreams of what could be, she even decided to sell her house to invest more. But the man deceived her. It was a well-planned scam. He disappeared with her money, and in an instant, Lauren lost everything. Her home, her savings, her sense of security. All of it vanished, leaving her and her daughter on the street. Her voice was filled with bitterness, but there was also something more, the determination and strength with which she fought for her daughter's future. Listening to her, I felt my heart swell with pain and anger. How could someone be so cruel to her? This woman had endured more than most could handle. At that moment, I knew I couldn't just leave her and her daughter to fend for themselves. Something inside me had changed, as if my view of the world and myself had suddenly shifted. I no longer saw the point in my wealth and luxury if I couldn't help those who truly needed it. "Move in with me," I said, knowing how unexpected it sounded. Lauren looked at me with distrust and even fear. "I want to help you start over. I have plenty of space, and you can stay as long as you need. I will help you get back on your feet." I saw hope flicker in her eyes, but it was quickly overshadowed by doubt. "Why?" she asked quietly, and in that question, I heard all her fears and reservations. "Why do you want to help us?" "Because I see how strong you are," I replied honestly. "You've been through so much, but you didn't give up. You've done everything to keep your daughter safe. I want to help because I can, and I genuinely want to." Lauren looked at me for several long seconds before finally nodding. There was gratitude in her eyes, but also something else, a kind of inner struggle that I didn't fully understand at that time. The move was a new beginning for Lauren and Emma. They started living in my mansion. I noticed that Lauren initially felt awkward, like an outsider in this place. She tried not to bother me, to remain invisible, but I did everything I could to make her feel like a welcome guest. We set them up in one of the best rooms. I bought them new clothes and made sure they had everything they needed. Emma adapted quickly, but it was more difficult for Lauren. She avoided me, as if she was afraid to get too close or appear intrusive. I understood her, so I decided to give her time. As we began to talk more, I started to get to know Lauren better. She was incredibly intelligent, kind, and dignified. I learned how much she once loved her job as a teacher, how she had always strived to give Emma the best, despite all the challenges. The more I got to know her, the more I admired her strength and resilience. Her story touched me deeply. Gradually, something began to stir in my heart, something I had never felt before. It was more than just sympathy or the desire to help. It was a feeling I was afraid to even acknowledge. I was starting to fall in love with Lauren, but despite everything, I kept it to myself. I feared breaking the fragile harmony that was beginning to form in our home. Moreover, I wasn't sure if Lauren felt the same way. Her past had been too difficult for her to open up to someone new so easily. One evening, when I came home, I saw Lauren and Emma sitting in the living room. They were laughing, reading a book, as the light from the fireplace filled the room with warmth. I stood in the doorway, watching them, and suddenly realized that this was what I had been searching for my whole life. This feeling of home, of happiness, and, most importantly, of love. I knew then that I couldn't stay silent any longer. I loved Lauren. I loved her for her strength, for the care she gave her daughter, and for the light she had brought into my home. The next few days were a real test for me. I tried to find the right moment to talk to her, but something always held me back. I wanted this confession to be special, for her to feel the depth of my feelings. And so one evening, I finally made up my mind. I invited Lauren to dinner in the garden. I had planned this evening specifically to create an atmosphere that would speak for me. The garden was illuminated by the soft glow of candles, their flickering lights giving the surroundings a magical charm. It was a bit chilly, but I made sure to have blankets on the table in case she got cold. When Lauren came down to the garden, I saw a look of surprise and slight bewilderment in her eyes. We sat at the table, and I tried to talk about simple things, not wanting to reveal my nervousness. I noticed her stealing glances at me several times, as if suspecting that this evening was going to be special. As dinner came to an end, I took a deep breath and stood up. My heart was pounding so hard, it felt like it might leap out of my chest. "Lauren," I began, dropping to one knee and pulling a small box from my pocket. Her eyes widened, and I saw them glisten with tears. "You've changed my life. You and Emma have become the light I always needed. I love you. I love you with all my heart. Will you marry me?" In that moment, I saw a whirlwind of emotions in her eyes: surprise, fear, happiness, and doubt. She looked at me, and I could see the inner struggle she was facing. But then, as if making up her mind, she smiled and nodded. "Yes," she whispered, and that single word became the most important one in my life. I lifted her into my arms and spun her around, feeling like the whole world belonged to us. At that moment, I realized I had found my true happiness, that all my wealth and success were nothing compared to the feeling I had holding her in my arms. We kissed, laughing and crying at the same time, and I knew that from this moment on, a new chapter in our lives would begin, one filled with love, warmth, and faith in the future. The wedding was magical. We invited all our family and friends, holding the celebration in our garden, which had now become a symbol of our new life. Lauren was stunning in her white dress, and Emma, in her little outfit, looked like a true princess. As we exchanged our vows, I felt that this was not just a moment, it was the instant when our souls became one. We exchanged rings, and I took Lauren's hand, knowing that an incredible life full of happiness and love awaited us. Thus ended the story that had begun on that cold, rainy evening on the street. But for us, this was not the end, but rather the beginning of a new chapter. A chapter where we would walk hand in hand, overcoming all challenges, and building our new home filled with joy and light.